Imagine a world where the invisible currents of thought shape every choice, every law, and every belief, long before anyone recognizes their presence. These currents are not noisy revolutions, not grand proclamations, but subtle shifts that ripple through societies, quietly rearranging priorities, values, and perceptions. They begin as whispers in intellectual circles, small debates online, trends in media, the selective focus of corporations, or even demographic changes that alter the cultural landscape. We tend to notice these movements only once they are already powerful, when they have reshaped how people live, work, and think. The ideology that will define the coming decades is not necessarily one we can currently label or categorize. It does not announce itself with banners or slogans. Instead, it grows in the spaces between policy and culture, between tradition and technology. Its essence is adaptive, fluid, and often invisible to those immersed in daily life. Understanding it requires a lens that focuses on patterns rather than personalities, currents rather than headlines. The world has always been guided by such subtle forces, forces that, once recognized, feel obvious in hindsight. To perceive these currents, we must examine history not as a series of isolated events, but as a series of patterns. Civilizations rise and fall, yet the mechanisms behind their success and failure often repeat. Cultural shifts, demographic pressures, technological revolutions, and economic realignments interact in predictable ways. The ideology of tomorrow will emerge from the intersections of these factors. It will appeal to both emotion and logic, promise solutions to contemporary anxieties, and resonate with those who feel excluded or constrained by existing structures. The key is not to seek a single manifesto, but to observe the matrix of influence where ideas gain traction and propagate quietly before becoming dominant. One of the most significant engines for the next ideology is culture itself. Ideas spread through stories, media, art, and social interactions. The channels of influence today are global and instantaneous. Platforms once used for casual communication now act as accelerators for narratives, validating certain worldviews while marginalizing others. Younger generations, who spend their formative years immersed in this interconnected digital ecosystem, internalize values and assumptions that previous generations would have encountered through slower, more localized means. This creates fertile ground for an ideology that is networked, adaptive, and deeply integrated into everyday life. Demographics reinforce these cultural currents. Urbanization, migration, aging populations, and generational shifts produce new social realities that influence which ideas gain traction. Societies that feel threatened by rapid change may cling to traditional frameworks, while those empowered by opportunity may embrace novel solutions and ideologies. The subtle balance between inclusion and exclusion, fear and hope, continuity and innovation, determines the receptivity of populations to emerging ideas. By the time an ideology becomes visible on a societal scale, it has already been incubating through decades of demographic and cultural evolution. Global geopolitics also amplifies or constrains these ideologies. Nations compete not only with armies or economies, but also through the soft power of cultural influence, policy alignment, and strategic messaging. Policies, alliances, and conflicts create an environment where certain worldviews flourish. What begins as a domestic discourse can cross borders quickly, influencing societies far removed from its origin. The ideology of the next decades will be shaped as much by these global currents as by local cultural or political movements. Understanding the emerging ideology requires attention to its adaptive and resilient nature. Unlike past movements that relied heavily on charismatic leaders or rigid dogma, this ideology will spread through decentralized networks, blending principles, narratives, and technologies. It will absorb lessons from competing ideas, modulate its tone for different audiences, and maintain cohesion without necessarily presenting itself as a unified doctrine. Its power lies in its subtlety. It shapes perception and behavior before most realize its existence. As these currents strengthen, we will notice their impact in policy decisions, corporate priorities, cultural trends, and even the framing of moral and ethical debates. Laws may shift gradually, education may reflect subtle realignments in values, and media narratives may favor certain interpretations while ignoring others. These changes, incremental individually, coalesce into profound societal transformation. By the time the ideology is acknowledged openly, it will already have molded expectations, behaviors, and institutions to align with its principles. To navigate this emerging landscape, individuals must cultivate awareness, critical thinking, and discernment. Observing patterns, questioning assumptions, and recognizing subtle shifts allow us to anticipate where ideas are leading societies. Knowledge becomes a tool not just for understanding, but for participation and influence. By engaging thoughtfully with these currents, one can act not as a passive observer, but as a conscious participant in shaping outcomes. As we delve deeper into the currents shaping the next ideology, it becomes clear that technology and communication are central to its spread. Information flows faster and wider than ever before, creating a networked consciousness where ideas can gain momentum almost instantaneously. This is not mere acceleration of old patterns. It is a transformation of how influence operates. Messages that resonate emotionally travel farther and faster than those grounded purely in reason. Memes, videos, articles, and even algorithmic recommendations create a reinforcing loop, shaping perception and framing debates before conscious deliberation can intervene. In this environment, the next ideology does not need to dominate through formal institutions initially. Instead, it infiltrates the everyday lives of individuals through subtle nudges, media portrayals, cultural references, and online discourse. People begin to internalize its principles without realizing they are doing so. Over time, these small shifts aggregate into broad cultural alignment. The power of such an ideology lies in its invisibility until it becomes inevitable, at which point it feels almost as though society has willingly adopted it, even though its roots lie in quiet, deliberate influence. Economic factors also intertwine with the rise of this ideology. Markets, resource distribution, and employment trends create incentives that favor certain values and behaviors. Businesses adjust practices to align with the evolving moral and cultural expectations of society, often anticipating the preferences of younger generations or the influential sectors of global markets. In turn, these adaptations reinforce the ideology, embedding it further into everyday life. This cyclical reinforcement ensures that the ideology is not a fleeting trend but a self-sustaining force that grows organically. Education and information consumption play equally significant roles. Curricula, media literacy, and access to information shape how individuals perceive the world. As educational approaches evolve, they do so in response to societal pressures, technological opportunities, and demographic realities. The emerging ideology benefits from this environment by subtly influencing the frameworks through which people understand history, ethics, and civic responsibility. Over decades, these frameworks solidify, ensuring that the ideology's principles are integrated at multiple layers of societal consciousness. Cultural adoption is neither uniform nor immediate. There are regions, communities, and groups that resist change, holding to older frameworks or values. Yet the adaptability of the emerging ideology allows it to modulate its messaging, presenting itself differently depending on the audience. In one context, it emphasizes innovation and progress. In another, stability and order. Its strength comes from this flexibility, making it resilient to opposition and capable of broad, diverse adoption without appearing coercive. The psychological appeal of this ideology cannot be understated. It promises clarity in a world increasingly complex and uncertain. By providing narratives that explain chaos, assign purpose, or validate feelings of disenfranchisement, it resonates deeply on an emotional level. Individuals feel aligned with a movement that seems to understand their anxieties, aspirations, and identity, creating loyalty that surpasses rational argument. This psychological grounding ensures that the ideology not only spreads but endures, forming the foundation of social cohesion among those who adopt it. Global connectivity accelerates the adoption and adaptation process. Ideas that originate in one region can cross oceans instantly, influenced by international events, media, and cross-cultural dialogue. Movements that once took decades to migrate from one society to another now travel in months or years. As a result, the next ideology is inherently global in potential, even if it first consolidates locally. The interplay between local culture and global currents creates a feedback mechanism where adoption in one region influences perception and acceptance elsewhere. Political systems respond slowly to these changes, often recognizing the ideological shift only after it has begun to shape public behavior and expectations. Policies, legal interpretations, and government priorities may lag behind the cultural and technological currents. However, once alignment becomes apparent, these institutions adapt, codifying principles that have already been normalized socially. This lag explains why major ideological shifts often appear sudden to the unobservant, when in reality they have been incubating for years beneath the surface of society. At its core, the next ideology represents an evolution of influence itself, a system that is simultaneously cultural, technological, economic, and psychological. It operates across multiple domains, drawing strength from its ability to embed itself into the fabric of daily life without overt coercion. Recognizing its emergence requires attentive observation, critical thinking, and an understanding of the subtle interactions that drive societies forward. By studying these interactions, one can anticipate not only the trajectory of the ideology but also its broader implications for global stability, cultural cohesion, and individual agency. The implications for individuals and societies are profound. Choices made today in governance, business, education, and personal conduct accumulate to create the conditions in which this ideology flourishes. Awareness of these currents allows for informed engagement, empowering people to participate thoughtfully in shaping societal norms, rather than being passive observers swept along by unseen forces. As the next ideology continues to take shape, one of its defining features is its integration with technology and daily life. Unlike past movements that relied primarily on speeches, pamphlets, or centralized organization, this ideology spreads through systems that are already embedded in human behavior. Algorithms, recommendation engines, social media platforms, and global communication networks act as silent amplifiers, transmitting values, priorities, and narratives across communities. People absorb these signals unconsciously, shaping perceptions and decisions long before the ideology is explicitly recognized. The adaptability of the ideology ensures that it resonates across a diverse spectrum of individuals. In some contexts, it emphasizes innovation, efficiency, and forward-thinking solutions. In others, it highlights security, tradition, and moral certainty. This fluidity allows it to appeal simultaneously to different generations, socioeconomic groups, and cultural backgrounds. Resistance is often met not with confrontation but with subtle reframing, demonstrating that the ideology can absorb critique and emerge stronger, refining its methods while maintaining coherence. Economic systems both reflect and reinforce its principles. Investments, consumer behavior, and corporate strategy increasingly align with the underlying values the ideology promotes. Industries adapt to shifting societal expectations, consciously or unconsciously promoting behaviors and preferences that advance the ideology's objectives. Market incentives, coupled with cultural resonance, create a self-reinforcing loop, embedding the ideology deeper into social structures. Over time, these economic dynamics translate into policy preferences, educational priorities, and community norms. Education serves as another vector for ideological reinforcement. Curricula, pedagogical methods, and the framing of historical and cultural narratives subtly influence how individuals conceptualize society, morality, and agency. Exposure to specific frameworks over time instills foundational assumptions about governance, responsibility, and civic participation. This process does not rely on overt instruction but on incremental normalization, ensuring that core principles are internalized before conscious evaluation. Psychology plays a central role in the ideology's appeal. Humans naturally seek clarity, belonging, and understanding in complex environments. The ideology provides narratives that satisfy these needs, offering explanations for uncertainty, moral frameworks for ambiguous situations, and pathways for meaningful engagement. It resonates emotionally while remaining flexible enough to adapt to rational critique. Its strength lies not in coercion, but in alignment with deep-seated cognitive and social tendencies. Global interconnectivity accelerates the pace of adoption. Localized shifts in perception can cascade across nations within months, reinforced by media, trade, and cultural exchange. Unlike past ideological waves constrained by geography, the current system operates across borders, translating localized principles into globally relevant patterns. The interplay between local culture and global transmission creates a dynamic in which ideas evolve rapidly, incorporating lessons from diverse contexts to strengthen resonance and applicability. Political and institutional systems often lag behind cultural adoption. Policies, laws, and governance structures take time to reflect evolving norms and values. This delay can create the impression of sudden ideological dominance when, in reality, societal alignment has been occurring incrementally over years or decades. Institutions eventually codify these principles, but by then, the ideology has already shaped public expectations, behavioral norms, and cultural assumptions. The emerging ideology's power is further magnified by its resilience to critique. Decentralized networks and fluid messaging allow it to absorb challenges, reinterpret dissent, and maintain momentum without fracturing. This adaptability ensures longevity, even when external pressures or opposition arise. Its persistence is subtle, often invisible, yet profoundly influential in shaping the contours of society. Individuals navigating this environment must cultivate both awareness and agency, recognizing patterns, questioning assumptions, and discerning the underlying principles allows for informed participation. The choice is not simply to accept or reject the ideology, but to understand its mechanisms, anticipate its influence, and engage thoughtfully in shaping its trajectory. Knowledge becomes both shield and tool, enabling purposeful action in a complex, evolving landscape. Ultimately, the next ideology challenges traditional conceptions of power, influence, and societal evolution. It demonstrates that dominance need not be imposed overtly, that change can occur through subtle alignment rather than coercion, and that the most effective movements integrate into the fabric of daily life. Its emergence is a reminder that ideas, when properly aligned with cultural, technological, and demographic currents, can shape the future quietly but decisively. As observers and participants, the responsibility is twofold: to notice these currents before they become overwhelming, and to act with awareness, discernment, and foresight. By engaging consciously, individuals contribute to shaping outcomes, influencing the balance between continuity and transformation, tradition and innovation, stability and progress. Awareness transforms potential passivity into informed participation, empowering people to navigate the currents of the next ideology with both clarity and purpose. The next ideology also thrives in the spaces between public perception and private belief. While outward behavior may appear unchanged, internalized assumptions, values, and priorities shift subtly over time. These changes are not announced with grand declarations. Instead, they manifest in the choices people make, the stories they share, and the way communities organize themselves. The ideology grows strongest where awareness is lowest, embedding principles quietly while the world continues with familiar routines. Communication networks act as accelerants. Messages that resonate emotionally travel farther and faster than rational argument alone. The network society ensures that ideas reinforce each other, creating feedback loops that normalize previously marginal perspectives. In turn, these normalized ideas influence governance, education, and culture, creating alignment across multiple layers of society simultaneously. Individuals internalize these principles without explicit recognition, reinforcing adoption across generations. Cultural adoption follows patterns shaped by social cohesion and perceived legitimacy. Communities are more likely to embrace ideas that resonate with local norms while simultaneously promising broader relevance. The next ideology leverages this by offering narratives that appear locally adaptive yet maintain coherence across diverse contexts. Its spread is organic, integrating into everyday life through media, entertainment, professional networks, and social rituals. Resistance is met not with confrontation, but by reframing narratives to align with emerging expectations, demonstrating adaptability and resilience. Economic alignment further strengthens the ideology. As businesses, industries, and markets respond to evolving societal values, they inadvertently reinforce the principles underpinning the ideology. Consumer behavior, corporate strategies, and investment trends converge, creating environments where adoption is economically advantageous. Over time, this integration translates into policy preferences, social incentives, and educational focus, embedding the ideology at multiple levels of societal operation. Psychological resonance is central to its effectiveness. Humans seek clarity, belonging, and meaning, particularly in complex and uncertain environments. The ideology provides explanations, frameworks, and moral anchors that satisfy these needs while remaining flexible enough to adapt to diverse experiences. Its appeal is subtle yet profound, producing loyalty not through coercion but through alignment with innate human tendencies. Global connectivity magnifies the impact. Ideas originating in one region can cascade across continents rapidly, influenced by media, trade, and international discourse. Local adoption informs global perception, creating a feedback loop that allows the ideology to evolve dynamically. It adapts lessons from one context to another, strengthening its applicability and resilience. Unlike past movements constrained by geography, this ideology operates transnationally, exploiting networks of communication and influence to establish pervasive reach. Political systems lag behind cultural and technological adoption, often recognizing ideological shifts only after societal behavior has already aligned. Policies, laws, and institutions eventually codify norms that have been socially ingrained for years. This lag creates the appearance of sudden ideological dominance, though in reality, the change has been incremental, pervasive, and largely unnoticed until consolidation occurs. Education serves as a subtle yet powerful vector for embedding principles. Curricula, pedagogical methods, and exposure to narratives shape long-term perceptions of governance, morality, and civic responsibility. Incremental normalization ensures that foundational assumptions are internalized over time, embedding the ideology into the cognitive framework of new generations. Exposure to ideas through repeated engagement, subtle framing, and cultural reinforcement ensures long-lasting influence without overt coercion. The ideology's decentralization is key to its resilience. Unlike movements dependent on singular leaders or rigid hierarchies, it thrives through networks, adaptability, and fluidity. Challenges and critique are absorbed, internalized, and reframed, allowing the ideology to persist even under scrutiny. Its durability derives from integration with everyday life, subtle shaping of perception, and reinforcement through multiple societal channels. Individuals navigating this environment must cultivate awareness, discernment, and engagement. Recognizing patterns, questioning assumptions, and understanding the mechanisms of influence are essential to participate thoughtfully. Choices made consciously today, whether in governance, education, business, or social interaction, shape the conditions in which the ideology operates. Awareness is not passive observation. It is active navigation, enabling influence over outcomes rather than being swept along by invisible currents. Ultimately, the next ideology illustrates the power of subtle influence over forceful imposition. It demonstrates that change can occur quietly, embedded in networks, reinforced by culture and technology, and adopted incrementally across society. Its emergence is a testament to the interplay of human cognition, social organization, and technological amplification. By observing its evolution, we gain insight into the mechanisms that shape societies, providing both understanding and foresight into future trajectories. As participants and observers, the lesson is clear. Attentiveness and critical thinking are indispensable. Recognizing these subtle currents allows for informed engagement, ensuring that individuals and communities can respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Knowledge, observation, and discernment empower action, guiding the balance between adaptation and preservation in a world shaped increasingly by ideas that operate quietly but pervasively. The trajectory of the next ideology is deeply intertwined with the ways people experience reality on a daily basis. It does not demand overt allegiance, nor does it rely solely on visible institutions to enforce its principles. Instead, it operates through subtle shifts in perception, small changes in routine, and the alignment of social incentives with its underlying values. Over time, these incremental changes accumulate, shaping expectations, behavior, and collective understanding long before the ideology is explicitly recognized. Media and information ecosystems amplify its influence, often without conscious awareness from those participating in them. Articles, videos, discussions, and curated narratives reinforce specific priorities, framing events and choices in ways that align with the emerging ideology. Individuals engage with these messages naturally, interpreting them through personal experience and social context, embedding principles into thought patterns. In this sense, the ideology is both pervasive and persistent, exerting its influence subtly yet broadly across society. Cultural adaptation is critical to its endurance. Communities adopt elements that resonate locally, while the ideology simultaneously maintains coherence across larger contexts. Its narratives are versatile, offering frameworks that appear locally relevant, morally compelling, and emotionally satisfying. Resistance is seldom confronted directly. Instead, the ideology integrates dissent into broader patterns, subtly reshaping understanding and perception until adoption becomes seamless. Economic systems reinforce this pattern. Business practices, consumer behavior, and industrial priorities gradually reflect the principles promoted by the ideology. Market incentives reward alignment with its values, creating a feedback loop in which adoption becomes advantageous. Over time, these economic and social pressures coalesce to normalize practices, behaviors, and expectations, embedding the ideology into the structural fabric of society. Education and knowledge dissemination amplify its effects. Curricula, media literacy programs, and informal learning channels gradually shape the ways individuals understand governance, ethics, and civic responsibility. Exposure to consistent framing and narratives over time solidifies underlying principles, ensuring that subsequent generations internalize them almost unconsciously. The result is a population whose worldview is aligned with the emerging ideology before formal acknowledgement occurs. Global networks accelerate adoption further. Ideas that gain traction in one region can influence perceptions, policy discussions, and cultural norms elsewhere, creating a dynamic environment in which the ideology adapts, evolves, and gains reinforcement through cross-cultural feedback. This global interplay ensures that adoption is not isolated or fragmented, but increasingly synchronized across multiple societies, magnifying impact. The resilience of the ideology stems from its decentralized nature. It does not depend on singular leadership or strict hierarchies. Challenges and critiques are absorbed and reinterpreted, strengthening the underlying framework. This adaptability ensures longevity, maintaining relevance even as circumstances change or opposition arises. Its power is quiet yet formidable, operating through integration with societal systems, perception, and behavior rather than force or decree. At the individual level, awareness is the most critical tool. Understanding patterns of influence, cultural reinforcement, and technological amplification allows people to engage consciously. Actions, choices, and discourse become meaningful not just in isolation, but as contributions to shaping the trajectory of societal thought. Participation is not passive. It is a deliberate exercise in navigation, reflection, and influence, balancing adaptation with intentionality. The next ideology demonstrates the power of subtlety in shaping societies. Change does not require overt confrontation. It can unfold through networks, media, and cultural adaptation. Incremental alignment of perception, values, and behavior produces profound outcomes over decades. Recognizing these patterns provides insight into societal evolution, helping individuals, communities, and institutions anticipate, respond to, and shape the currents that will define the future. In conclusion, the emergence of this ideology is a reminder that influence operates continuously, invisibly, and cumulatively. Observing, understanding, and engaging with these forces equips us to navigate a complex world where ideas shape reality as much as institutions or laws. Awareness, critical thought, and active participation empower individuals to engage responsibly, balancing continuity with transformation, tradition with innovation, and certainty with adaptability. As viewers, consider your role within this evolving landscape. How do your choices, beliefs, and actions intersect with the ideologies quietly shaping your world? Reflect on your position, engage thoughtfully, and share insights with others. Join the conversation, contribute to awareness, and explore the patterns that guide our collective future. If this exploration resonated, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing, helping others understand the subtle yet profound forces that quietly shape the societies we inhabit. The evolution of the next ideology also depends heavily on the ways communities define identity, belonging, and purpose. As societies become increasingly interconnected, the traditional markers of affiliation, geography, lineage, or local tradition are supplemented, and sometimes replaced, by networks of shared ideas, values, and experiences. Individuals begin to align not merely with physical communities, but with the patterns of thought and behavior that resonate most deeply with their personal aspirations and moral understanding. This alignment is subtle, often invisible, yet it forms a foundation for the ideology's influence, as people collectively reinforce principles that originated quietly at the peripheries of awareness. Technology amplifies these shifts by creating spaces where ideas propagate, converge, and adapt continuously. Digital platforms, algorithmic curation, and global communication networks serve as accelerators, making it possible for concepts to gain traction across vast populations with remarkable speed. Unlike previous generations, which required time and physical proximity for ideas to take root, contemporary society experiences a rapid feedback loop where cultural and ideological adoption can spread almost instantaneously. The result is a world in which influence is both pervasive and subtle, shaping perception long before policies or institutions formally respond. Economic structures further intertwine with these ideological currents. The incentives of markets, business priorities, and professional norms align with the values emerging from the ideology, creating environments where adoption is rewarded and deviation may carry social or financial costs. Over time, these pressures coalesce into normalized behavior, reinforcing principles without overt instruction or enforcement. Individuals internalize norms, businesses adjust strategies, and governments slowly codify expectations, all contributing to a system that naturally perpetuates the ideology. Cultural mediums, including entertainment, literature, and art, serve as additional vectors for influence. Narratives crafted within these domains reflect emerging priorities and subtly embed values, providing repeated exposure that reinforces the underlying ideology. The effect is cumulative. Audiences absorb patterns of thought and moral reasoning through stories, imagery, and repeated motifs. This integration ensures that the ideology is not merely intellectual but lived, experienced, and internalized across generations. Education, too, is critical in shaping receptivity. Pedagogical approaches, access to information, and socialization through learning channels subtly instill frameworks for understanding governance, ethics, and social responsibility. These frameworks establish cognitive pathways through which ideas are processed and evaluated. The ideology benefits from this process, embedding principles that guide interpretation, judgment, and decision-making long before explicit awareness or debate emerges. The psychology underpinning adoption is nuanced. Humans naturally seek coherence, understanding, and belonging, particularly in complex or uncertain environments. The emerging ideology provides narratives that satisfy these needs, offering clarity, moral grounding, and pathways for meaningful engagement. It resonates emotionally while remaining adaptive to rational critique, allowing loyalty and adherence to develop organically rather than through coercion. This balance of emotional and rational appeal ensures that the ideology remains compelling, flexible, and resilient. Global interconnectivity magnifies these dynamics. Localized shifts can ripple across continents, influenced by trade, media, and cross-cultural dialogue. Lessons from one society inform adaptations in another, creating a global feedback mechanism that strengthens coherence while maintaining adaptability. Unlike historical ideological waves limited by geography, the current context allows simultaneous evolution and adoption across multiple regions, reinforcing the ideology's principles in diverse contexts while retaining unity of purpose. Political and institutional systems respond more slowly than culture, technology, or psychology. Laws, governance, and policy often lag behind prevailing norms, creating an illusion of sudden dominance when the ideology has, in fact, been developing quietly over decades. Institutions eventually codify practices and expectations that society has already normalized, demonstrating the power of subtle, decentralized influence over overt authority. The ideology's resilience lies in its decentralized, adaptive structure. It does not depend on singular leadership, dogmatic adherence, or rigid hierarchy. Instead, it thrives through networks, flexibility, and the ability to reinterpret critique as reinforcement. Challenges are absorbed and reframed, ensuring longevity and continued relevance across changing contexts. Its influence is systemic, operating through perception, habit, and structural alignment rather than through explicit command. For individuals navigating this landscape, awareness and engagement are crucial. Recognizing patterns, evaluating the mechanisms of influence, and understanding the subtle ways in which ideas shape behavior allow for conscious participation. Action becomes deliberate rather than reactive, enabling individuals to align with, challenge, or adapt the emerging principles responsibly. Knowledge transforms observation into agency, providing a framework for navigating a complex and evolving ideological environment. Ultimately, the next ideology illustrates the profound power of subtle systemic influence. Change does not require coercion, visible authority, or immediate recognition. Incremental adoption through networks, culture, technology, and psychology ensures that principles embed themselves deeply and persistently within society. By observing these currents, individuals gain insight into not only the ideology itself but also the broader mechanisms that shape human history, behavior, and collective outcomes. As viewers, the challenge is to consider your position within these flows. How do your choices, interactions, and interpretations intersect with the ideologies quietly shaping your environment? Reflection, discernment, and thoughtful engagement empower individuals to act with awareness, influence outcomes, and contribute meaningfully to shaping the direction of societies in a world increasingly guided by subtle yet pervasive ideas. If this exploration resonates, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing to continue the dialogue and expand awareness of the forces quietly shaping our collective future. As the next ideology continues to diffuse, its influence extends into the subtle ways individuals perceive morality, ethics, and societal norms. It does not confront directly or demand compliance through overt force. Instead, it reframes the questions people ask themselves, the comparisons they make, and the standards they accept. Over time, these reframings accumulate, altering how communities evaluate right and wrong, fairness and justice, success and responsibility. The ideology embeds itself in cognition, guiding thought patterns before it manifests as overt policy or action. Technology reinforces this influence by providing real-time feedback loops. Social platforms, recommendation systems, and communication networks constantly signal approval, disapproval, or relevance, subtly aligning behavior and perception with emerging norms. What might have once been considered fringe or marginal becomes normalized as repeated exposure creates consensus over time. Individuals internalize patterns of behavior and thought that align with the ideology without conscious recognition, generating alignment across vast populations simultaneously. Cultural expression serves as both catalyst and reinforcement. Music, literature, cinema, and digital media convey narratives that reflect and propagate ideological principles. Repeated engagement with these narratives ingrains underlying assumptions and values, producing cognitive resonance that shapes judgment and expectation. People begin to anticipate outcomes, evaluate actions, and interpret events through frameworks implicitly aligned with the ideology, even before explicit acknowledgement occurs. Economic incentives further integrate the ideology into daily life. Businesses, employment structures, and market trends respond to social expectations, creating feedback loops that reward alignment and subtly penalize divergence. Over decades, these forces normalize behavior across institutions, communities, and individual choices, embedding ideological principles into the structural architecture of society. Financial, social, and professional incentives converge, creating environments where adoption is not only natural but advantageous. Education and socialization act as long-term vectors for embedding principles. Curricula, informal learning, and media literacy shape how individuals interpret information, interact with peers, and engage with governance. Exposure to consistent frameworks over time results in foundational assumptions that guide judgment and behavior, often subconsciously. The ideology benefits from this slow, accumulative process, ensuring durability and depth across generations. Psychological alignment ensures resonance. Humans seek clarity, belonging, and validation. By offering coherent explanations for uncertainty, pathways for purpose, and frameworks for ethical evaluation, the ideology satisfies these innate needs. Its flexibility allows individuals to engage rationally while feeling emotionally affirmed, producing adherence that is both voluntary and enduring. Loyalty is cultivated through perceived understanding and alignment rather than through overt pressure, ensuring that commitment is subtle, personal, and resilient. Global interconnectedness magnifies the pace and scale of adoption. Ideas can leap across borders instantly, influenced by media, commerce, and cultural exchange. Feedback from diverse societies refines and strengthens the ideology, ensuring that it remains relevant, adaptable, and coherent across multiple contexts. The ideology evolves dynamically, incorporating lessons from varying environments to sustain momentum, expand influence, and resist fragmentation. Political and institutional systems, though slower to react, eventually codify the principles already normalized culturally. Law, governance, and policy follow societal alignment rather than leading it. This temporal lag creates the illusion of sudden dominance, when in truth, the ideological transformation has been incubating quietly for decades. Institutions consolidate changes already embedded in cognition, culture, and behavior, confirming the subtle power of decentralized, systemic influence. The decentralized and adaptive nature of the ideology ensures resilience. It thrives without central authority, rigid hierarchy, or charismatic leadership. Critique is integrated and reinterpreted, strengthening its principles rather than destabilizing them. Influence operates not through coercion but through networks, perception, and repeated engagement, embedding itself in cognition, society, and institutions simultaneously. This subtlety is its strength, enabling sustained, pervasive impact over generations. For individuals navigating this environment, conscious awareness is vital. Recognizing emerging patterns, questioning assumptions, and understanding the mechanisms of influence enables informed participation. Choices, behavior, and communication become tools for shaping outcomes rather than passive responses to societal currents. Engagement requires discernment, reflection, and deliberate action, balancing adaptation with critical evaluation and personal integrity. The next ideology exemplifies the profound impact of gradual, systemic, and subtle influence. It demonstrates that change need not be abrupt or coercive to be transformative. Alignment across cognition, behavior, culture, and institutions is sufficient to reshape societies over decades. Observing these currents allows insight not only into the ideology itself but also into the broader mechanisms of historical, cultural, and social evolution. Awareness and engagement transform passive observation into active participation, empowering individuals to navigate, influence, and understand a complex, interconnected world shaped by ideas that operate quietly yet decisively. As viewers, reflect on your position within these flows. How do your actions, interpretations, and choices intersect with the ideologies shaping your environment? Awareness, discernment, and active engagement empower you to participate thoughtfully, influence outcomes, and understand the profound, often invisible, forces shaping society. If this perspective resonates, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing to foster discussion, insight, and awareness of the subtle yet transformative ideologies guiding our collective future. The deeper we explore the emergence of the next ideology, the more it becomes evident that its power lies not in confrontation, but in integration. It operates through networks, habits, and perception, subtly shaping the frameworks through which people understand the world. It influences thought before action, perception before policy, and values before law. This quiet, systemic adoption allows it to spread widely, creating alignment across generations, communities, and even nations, without the need for overt enforcement. Its adaptability is one of its most defining traits. In some contexts, it emphasizes innovation and progress, appealing to those who seek efficiency, discovery, and future-oriented solutions. In others, it emphasizes stability, moral clarity, and preservation, resonating with those who value order, tradition, and cohesion. By presenting different facets depending on the audience, the ideology maintains coherence while maximizing appeal, allowing it to penetrate multiple layers of society simultaneously. Economic forces reinforce this adoption. Market trends, consumer behavior, and professional incentives align with the ideology's principles, encouraging individuals and institutions to internalize its values. Businesses adjust practices, policies, and marketing strategies to reflect emerging societal expectations, unintentionally amplifying the ideology's influence. Over time, these aligned incentives create environments where conformity to its principles is both natural and beneficial, further entrenching its presence. Cultural and educational frameworks serve as silent vectors of reinforcement. Storytelling, media, and curriculum design embed ideas subtly over time, shaping perceptions, expectations, and cognitive patterns. People internalize these principles through repeated exposure, gradually forming a worldview aligned with the ideology. Unlike overt indoctrination, this process relies on subtle normalization, making the adoption of principles almost seamless and deeply embedded within personal and collective consciousness. Psychology remains central to its effectiveness. The ideology satisfies innate human desires for clarity, purpose, and belonging. It provides frameworks for understanding uncertainty, evaluating moral dilemmas, and navigating complex social landscapes. By resonating emotionally while accommodating rational assessment, it cultivates engagement, loyalty, and adherence without the need for coercion. Individuals feel understood, aligned, and affirmed, creating voluntary commitment that endures. Global connectivity accelerates and magnifies adoption. Ideas that resonate in one region rapidly influence others through communication networks, media, and trade. Feedback loops between local and global adoption strengthen principles while allowing adaptation to diverse contexts. Unlike historical ideologies constrained by geography, this one evolves dynamically, benefiting from constant reinforcement, iteration, and cross-cultural influence. Political and institutional systems often follow rather than lead. Laws, policies, and regulations are slow to catch up to cultural and social adoption. The apparent sudden dominance of an ideology is frequently the result of decades of quiet alignment in perception, behavior, and values. Once institutions codify principles that society has already internalized, the ideology appears omnipresent and inevitable, demonstrating the power of decentralized, systemic influence. Decentralization ensures resilience. By not relying on central authority, hierarchical enforcement, or charismatic leadership, the ideology adapts fluidly to challenges. Critique is absorbed and reinterpreted, strengthening the underlying framework rather than weakening it. Its impact is systemic, pervasive, and enduring, operating through networks, perception, and repeated engagement rather than direct imposition. For individuals, conscious engagement is essential. Awareness of emerging patterns, mechanisms of influence, and the subtle shaping of perception allows active participation. Decisions, communication, and behavior gain significance, enabling thoughtful navigation rather than passive acquiescence. Knowledge and observation empower individuals to influence outcomes, aligning action with intentionality and ethical discernment. Ultimately, the next ideology exemplifies the profound power of subtle, cumulative, and systemic influence. Change does not require confrontation, coercion, or sudden upheaval. It unfolds quietly, embedding itself in culture, cognition, economy, and social structures over decades. Observing these processes provides insight into societal evolution, mechanisms of influence, and the shaping of collective futures. Awareness transforms passive observation into deliberate engagement, enabling individuals to understand and act within complex ideological currents. As viewers, consider your role within these forces. How do your beliefs, choices, and actions interact with the ideologies quietly shaping your environment? Reflection, discernment, and engagement empower participation, providing agency in a world increasingly guided by subtle yet transformative currents. If this resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share, continuing the conversation about the ideas that are silently guiding the future of society. The influence of the next ideology is reinforced not just through ideas, but through the subtle shaping of human behavior and expectation. It aligns with daily routines, social norms, and professional practices, embedding principles in the rhythm of everyday life. Small choices accumulate into collective patterns, producing systemic alignment long before formal acknowledgement or institutional codification occurs. This power lies in integration rather than imposition, allowing change to be internalized organically. Communication networks act as amplifiers, silently transmitting values, priorities, and frameworks of understanding. People absorb signals unconsciously, shaping perceptions and decision-making processes before they are consciously aware of the influence. This invisible diffusion ensures broad adoption across diverse communities, creating alignment in thought, expectation, and behavior across generations. The ideology spreads quietly, yet profoundly, across the social fabric. Cultural adaptation ensures resilience. The ideology presents itself differently depending on context, emphasizing innovation, efficiency, and forward-thinking in some areas while highlighting tradition, morality, and stability in others. This versatility allows it to appeal to multiple demographics simultaneously, integrating into diverse cultural frameworks without conflict. By adjusting its emphasis to resonate locally while maintaining global coherence, it ensures sustained relevance and adoption. Economic alignment further reinforces adoption. Businesses, industries, and professional structures adjust to reflect changing societal values, unintentionally amplifying the ideology's principles. Market incentives reward behaviors that align with emerging norms, embedding influence through choice rather than force. Over time, these convergences of economics and culture solidify the ideology within the structural and operational frameworks of society. Education continues to be a long-term vector. Curricula, informal learning, and media literacy programs guide cognitive patterns and interpretive frameworks. Through incremental exposure, individuals internalize principles, assumptions, and analytical approaches consistent with the ideology. This gradual process ensures durability, embedding influence in ways that persist across generations while remaining largely invisible during the adoption phase. Psychology plays a critical role in adherence. Humans naturally seek understanding, belonging, and moral clarity, especially in complex or uncertain environments. The ideology provides frameworks that satisfy these needs, offering coherence, emotional resonance, and paths for meaningful engagement. Its design encourages voluntary alignment, producing loyalty and adherence without overt enforcement. Individuals feel empowered and understood, creating a subtle yet powerful mechanism for sustained influence. Global interconnectivity magnifies these dynamics. Adoption in one region influences perceptions and behaviors in others, creating a feedback loop that reinforces coherence while allowing adaptation to diverse cultural contexts. Unlike historical ideological waves constrained by borders, this ideology evolves dynamically across societies, incorporating lessons, refining approaches, and spreading influence transnationally. Its impact is cumulative and systemic. Political and institutional structures often lag behind cultural adoption. Laws, policies, and governance follow social alignment rather than lead it, creating the impression of sudden ideological dominance. In reality, society has already internalized principles, and institutional recognition only consolidates changes that have been quietly occurring over decades. The power of decentralized influence becomes evident in this temporal gap between adoption and codification. The ideology's decentralized structure ensures resilience. It does not rely on singular leadership, hierarchical control, or rigid dogma. Critique is absorbed and reframed, strengthening principles rather than weakening them. Influence is exercised through networks, perception, and repeated engagement, ensuring durability across changing environments. Its subtle integration into cognition, culture, and institutions allows it to endure and adapt, outlasting traditional movements dependent on overt control. For individuals, awareness and critical engagement are essential. Understanding patterns of influence, the mechanisms of cultural reinforcement, and the subtle shaping of perception allows active participation. Choices, communication, and behavior become tools for shaping outcomes rather than passive reactions to societal currents. Knowledge transforms observation into agency, enabling deliberate action in a complex ideological landscape. Ultimately, the next ideology demonstrates the profound impact of incremental, systemic, and subtle influence. It proves that transformation does not require coercion or sudden upheaval. It unfolds quietly, embedding itself in the networks, routines, and thought patterns that structure human life. Observing and understanding these currents provides insight into societal evolution and equips individuals with the tools to navigate and influence the forces shaping collective futures. As viewers, consider your place within these flows. How do your actions, choices, and interpretations interact with the ideas quietly shaping your environment? Awareness, reflection, and deliberate engagement empower participation, providing agency in a world increasingly guided by subtle yet transformative currents. If this resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share, continuing the conversation and fostering understanding of the ideologies quietly steering our collective trajectory. The next ideology's influence is most powerful because it operates invisibly, shaping perception before action, thought before policy, and values before law. Its principles are woven into the fabric of daily life, subtly guiding decisions, expectations, and behavior. By integrating into routines, culture, and social structures, it ensures adoption without coercion, embedding itself so deeply that it becomes almost indistinguishable from ordinary life. Its quiet pervasiveness allows it to persist, evolve, and reinforce itself across time and context. Communication and media networks serve as catalysts, transmitting signals of approval, relevance, and moral alignment. Individuals absorb these cues unconsciously, aligning behavior and thought with the emerging ideological patterns. Repetition across platforms and contexts reinforces internalization, creating a shared cognitive framework across society. The ideology spreads without centralized control, relying on networked adoption and subtle feedback loops to influence perception and decision-making on a massive scale. Cultural adaptation enhances its resilience. It can emphasize progress and innovation in some contexts, while emphasizing order, tradition, and ethical clarity in others. This flexibility allows the ideology to resonate with diverse communities simultaneously, aligning with local norms while maintaining global coherence. Resistance is rarely confronted openly. Instead, narratives are reframed to incorporate dissent, making adoption seem natural and unobtrusive. Economic systems reinforce the ideology through alignment of incentives. Businesses, industries, and professional environments adjust practices in response to social expectations, unintentionally amplifying ideological principles. Markets reward alignment and subtly discourage deviation, embedding influence through choice rather than force. Over time, the convergence of economic, social, and cultural pressures ensures that the ideology is normalized structurally and behaviorally, reinforcing adoption across generations. Education plays a pivotal role in its persistence. Curricula, informal learning, and exposure to media shape cognitive frameworks and interpretive patterns. Incremental exposure to consistent ideas embeds assumptions, perspectives, and analytical approaches that align with the ideology. This slow, cumulative process ensures long-term influence, integrating principles deeply into the collective consciousness without overt instruction or enforcement. Psychology drives engagement and loyalty. Humans seek understanding, belonging, and purpose, particularly in complex or uncertain environments. The ideology provides coherent explanations, emotional resonance, and pathways for meaningful participation, aligning both rational evaluation and emotional satisfaction. Voluntary alignment emerges naturally, creating adherence that is resilient, internalized, and enduring. Individuals feel empowered, affirmed, and understood, deepening their connection to the ideological framework. Global interconnectivity magnifies influence. Concepts originating in one region quickly ripple across continents, facilitated by communication networks, trade, and cultural exchange. Feedback loops ensure continuous refinement and adaptation, allowing the ideology to remain coherent while integrating diverse local experiences. Unlike historical movements constrained by geography, contemporary ideologies evolve dynamically across societies, reinforcing adoption transnationally. Political and institutional responses lag behind cultural adoption. Laws, policies, and governance follow society's internalized norms, creating the impression of sudden dominance when, in reality, alignment has been quietly developing for decades. Institutions codify behaviors and expectations that have already become normalized, illustrating the subtle, decentralized, and cumulative power of influence. Decentralization is central to resilience. Without dependence on singular leadership, hierarchical control, or dogmatic rigidity, the ideology adapts fluidly to challenges. Critiques are absorbed and reframed, strengthening its principles rather than destabilizing them. Influence operates systemically through perception, networks, and habitual reinforcement, ensuring longevity and continuity despite environmental or societal changes. For individuals, conscious awareness is critical. Recognizing emerging patterns, understanding mechanisms of influence, and observing subtle shifts in behavior and thought allows for intentional participation. Choices, communication, and engagement gain significance, enabling deliberate action rather than passive conformity. Knowledge transforms perception into agency, empowering individuals to navigate complex ideological currents with discernment, intentionality, and ethical judgment. Ultimately, the next ideology demonstrates the profound potential of incremental, systemic, and subtle influence. Transformation unfolds quietly, embedding itself in cognition, culture, social structures, and institutional frameworks. Change is cumulative, pervasive, and enduring, proving that subtle alignment can reshape societies without confrontation or coercion. Awareness, observation, and thoughtful engagement provide insight into these processes, equipping individuals to understand, navigate, and influence the trajectory of collective human experience. As viewers, reflect on your role within these invisible yet powerful currents. How do your actions, beliefs, and interpretations intersect with ideologies quietly shaping your environment? Awareness, reflection, and deliberate engagement allow participation with agency, enabling influence in a world increasingly guided by subtle, pervasive ideas. If this perspective resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share to continue exploring the forces silently steering our collective future, fostering understanding, insight, and conscious navigation of society's evolving landscape. So the next ideology moves quietly, shaping the rhythms of daily life, the assumptions behind decisions, and the subtle expectations that guide human interaction. It does not announce itself with fanfare or confrontation. Instead, it insinuates principles through patterns, routines, and subtle reinforcement. Over time, these small shifts accumulate into pervasive influence, aligning cognition, behavior, and social expectation across communities. Its power lies in invisibility, in the slow and steady shaping of collective perception and choice. Social networks and media amplify these currents. Messages, narratives, and curated content subtly signal approval, disapproval, or relevance, guiding the frameworks through which individuals interpret events. Exposure becomes habitual. Ideas normalize before they are consciously acknowledged. People adopt behaviors and thought patterns without realizing the underlying ideological shaping, and the alignment spreads quietly yet relentlessly through millions of interactions every day. Culture acts as both mirror and amplifier. Entertainment, literature, and artistic expression reflect the emerging values while simultaneously embedding them. Repeated engagement with these narratives conditions perception, morality, and expectation. Individuals internalize patterns, developing a worldview that resonates with the ideology, often without overt recognition. Adoption becomes seamless, appearing as natural understanding rather than imposed belief. Economic and institutional structures reinforce the ideology. Market incentives reward alignment, social recognition encourages conformity, and professional advancement reflects adherence to emerging norms. Over time, these feedback loops normalize behavior, embedding influence structurally as well as culturally. Adoption is not enforced, it is incentivized, integrated, and ultimately self-sustaining, making the ideology resilient and adaptive. Education plays a long-term role, shaping interpretive frameworks and cognitive habits. Curricula, media exposure, and informal learning establish patterns of evaluation, reasoning, and understanding that align with the ideology. Incremental exposure over years embeds principles deeply, influencing how individuals perceive fairness, success, morality, and civic responsibility. The ideology gains durability not through authority, but through habitual internalization and continuous reinforcement. Psychology is central. Humans seek coherence, understanding, and belonging. The ideology offers narratives that satisfy these needs, providing clarity in uncertainty, moral framing for complex dilemmas, and paths for meaningful engagement. Emotional resonance reinforces rational acceptance, creating voluntary loyalty and durable adherence. Individuals feel understood, affirmed, and aligned, producing a connection that is subtle yet profound. Global interconnectedness amplifies adoption. Ideas, trends, and frameworks originating in one society ripple across borders, influenced by communication networks, trade, and cultural exchange. Feedback from diverse regions strengthens coherence while permitting localized adaptation, allowing the ideology to evolve dynamically across multiple contexts. Unlike historical movements constrained by geography, contemporary ideologies integrate insights globally, producing synchronized patterns of influence and adoption. Political and institutional systems often follow rather than lead. Laws, policies, and governance codify norms already internalized by society, creating the impression of sudden dominance. In reality, ideological alignment has been quietly developing for decades. Institutions reflect the adoption that has already occurred culturally, structurally, and cognitively, illustrating the subtle yet pervasive power of systemic influence. Its decentralized nature ensures resilience. The ideology does not rely on singular leadership, rigid hierarchy, or dogmatic enforcement. Critique is absorbed, reframed, and incorporated, strengthening principles rather than undermining them. Influence operates through networks, perception, and cumulative engagement, producing longevity and adaptability. Its silent integration across cognition, culture, and institutions guarantees enduring impact, even in the face of opposition or societal change. For individuals, conscious awareness is critical. Recognizing patterns, understanding mechanisms of influence, and observing subtle shifts in perception enables informed participation. Choices, behavior, and discourse gain significance, transforming passive observation into active engagement. Awareness provides agency, empowering individuals to navigate, influence, and adapt within a complex ideological landscape thoughtfully and responsibly. Ultimately, the next ideology exemplifies the power of gradual, systemic, and subtle influence. It demonstrates that transformation does not require confrontation, coercion, or immediate recognition. Instead, adoption occurs organically through culture, cognition, economy, and social norms. Understanding these processes allows insight into both the ideology itself and the broader mechanisms of societal evolution. Observing, reflecting, and engaging thoughtfully equips individuals to navigate and influence the world intelligently. As viewers, consider your role within these currents. How do your choices, interpretations, and actions interact with the ideologies quietly shaping your environment? Awareness, discernment, and intentional engagement enable participation with agency, allowing influence and understanding in a world increasingly guided by subtle yet powerful currents. If this resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share to continue exploring and understanding the forces silently guiding our collective future. The ideology moves like a river beneath the surface, shaping perception, values, and expectations quietly yet relentlessly. It does not demand attention. Instead, it integrates into the flow of daily life. Small decisions, habitual actions, and repeated exposures gradually align thought and behavior with its principles. Over time, this creates a society where adoption is so natural that it feels inevitable, not imposed, demonstrating the extraordinary power of subtle, cumulative influence. Media and communication channels accelerate its reach. Stories, images, and narratives are absorbed subconsciously, reinforcing cognitive frameworks and societal expectations. Individuals internalize these patterns, creating alignment in thought and perception before conscious recognition occurs. Influence spreads not through force, but through observation, habit, and repeated engagement, embedding itself in communities and across generations. Culture acts as both vehicle and amplifier. Literature, music, film, and visual media convey values and assumptions that shape perception, judgment, and expectation. Repeated engagement with these narratives fosters resonance, conditioning ethical evaluation, decision-making, and social interaction. Over time, the ideology becomes woven into the fabric of culture, producing alignment that feels intuitive rather than imposed. Economic and professional structures reinforce these patterns. Incentives reward alignment with emergent norms, creating structural encouragement for adoption. Market forces, employment opportunities, and professional recognition all reflect the subtle shaping of society's values. Individuals find that conformity with the ideology is advantageous, making adoption both natural and beneficial. The result is systemic embedding of principles without coercion. Education and lifelong learning serve as vectors of long-term reinforcement. Curricula, media literacy, and informal education establish interpretive frameworks and cognitive habits. Exposure over years ensures that individuals internalize assumptions, perspectives, and reasoning patterns consistent with the ideology. Incremental integration creates durability, embedding influence at foundational levels of cognition and understanding. Psychology reinforces adherence. Humans seek clarity, belonging, and meaningful engagement. The ideology provides coherent frameworks for navigating uncertainty, moral complexity, and social interaction. Emotional resonance amplifies rational acceptance, producing loyalty and durable commitment. Individuals feel aligned and affirmed, creating voluntary engagement that strengthens societal adoption across generations. Global networks magnify these effects. Ideas travel instantly, feedback loops refine principles, and cultural exchange ensures adaptability across contexts. Unlike past movements constrained by geography or communication, this ideology evolves dynamically, integrating lessons from diverse societies while maintaining coherence. Adoption becomes synchronized across multiple populations, producing systemic alignment on an unprecedented scale. Political and institutional frameworks often codify adoption long after societal alignment has occurred. Laws, regulations, and policy reflect values already internalized culturally, creating the perception of sudden dominance. In reality, systemic influence has been accumulating quietly for decades. Institutions consolidate pre-existing alignment, confirming the enduring power of subtle, decentralized influence. Decentralization ensures resilience. Without reliance on singular leadership or rigid hierarchy, the ideology adapts fluidly to challenges. Critique is integrated, opposition is reframed, and engagement is voluntary yet effective. Influence operates through perception, networks, and repeated exposure, ensuring longevity and adaptability. Its integration across cognition, culture, and structure guarantees that it endures through societal shifts and challenges. For individuals, conscious engagement is essential. Awareness of patterns, understanding mechanisms, and observing subtle shifts in thought and behavior allow deliberate navigation. Choices, communication, and actions become instruments of influence rather than passive responses. Knowledge transforms observation into agency, empowering individuals to act with intentionality and ethical discernment in a complex ideological landscape. Ultimately, the next ideology exemplifies the extraordinary potency of gradual, systemic, and invisible influence. It demonstrates that transformation does not require overt confrontation, dramatic upheaval, or coercion. Change unfolds organically, embedding itself in culture, cognition, social structure, and institutional frameworks. Recognizing these currents provides profound insight into both the ideology itself and the mechanisms driving societal evolution. Awareness and engagement equip individuals to understand, navigate, and influence these forces intelligently. As viewers, consider your position within these currents. How do your beliefs, actions, and interpretations intersect with the ideologies silently shaping your world? Reflection, discernment, and active engagement provide agency, allowing participation in shaping outcomes and understanding systemic influence. If this perspective resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share, continuing the exploration of the ideas quietly steering society's future, fostering insight, awareness, and thoughtful engagement. The ideology's subtlety is its strength. It does not rely on confrontation or explicit enforcement. Instead, it operates quietly through perception, habit, and social expectation. Small shifts in behavior and thought accumulate over time, producing alignment across communities, institutions, and generations. Its influence is pervasive because it integrates seamlessly into the structures of daily life, shaping how people think, act, and interpret their world without overt recognition. Media, storytelling, and cultural expression act as silent conduits. Narratives, images, and repeated themes embed values and assumptions, conditioning perception and expectation. Individuals internalize these frameworks gradually, developing shared understandings that resonate with the ideology. Influence spreads organically, flowing through networks of communication and engagement, shaping society in ways that are both profound and invisible. Economic and professional incentives reinforce adoption. Rewards for alignment and subtle penalties for divergence guide behavior, embedding principles into structural and practical domains. Market forces, employment opportunities, and institutional recognition create environments where adherence to the ideology is advantageous, producing voluntary conformity. Over decades, these convergences of culture, economy, and daily practice solidify systemic integration. Education, from formal curricula to informal learning and media exposure, fosters cognitive alignment. Repeated engagement with consistent frameworks embeds assumptions and reasoning patterns that reflect the ideology's principles. This slow, incremental process ensures durability, allowing the ideology to influence perception and decision-making across generations without direct imposition. Psychological resonance sustains engagement. Humans seek clarity, understanding, and social belonging. The ideology provides coherent frameworks for navigating uncertainty, moral complexity, and social expectation. Emotional and rational satisfaction align, producing voluntary adherence and loyalty. Individuals feel understood, validated, and empowered, reinforcing internalization and perpetuating influence over time. Global interconnectivity amplifies and accelerates adoption. Ideas, practices, and feedback loops traverse borders instantly, influencing distant populations and integrating diverse perspectives. The ideology evolves dynamically, incorporating lessons from multiple contexts while maintaining coherence. Its adoption is synchronized, systemic, and pervasive, spanning societies and generating alignment on a scale previously unseen in history. Political and institutional codification often lags behind cultural adoption. Laws, governance, and policy formalize behaviors and expectations already normalized within society. The perception of sudden ideological dominance masks the decades of quiet alignment occurring beneath the surface. Institutions reflect pre-existing influence rather than initiating it, demonstrating the extraordinary power of decentralized, cumulative adoption. Decentralization ensures resilience and adaptability. The ideology thrives without hierarchical control, singular leadership, or rigid enforcement. Critique is absorbed and reframed, Opposition is integrated rather than suppressed, and influence operates through networks, perception, and habitual reinforcement. Its integration across cognition, culture, and institutional structures guarantees continuity and durability, even in the face of societal upheaval. For individuals, awareness is critical. Recognizing patterns, understanding mechanisms of influence, and observing subtle shifts in thought and behavior enable deliberate navigation. Choices, actions, and communication become instruments of agency rather than passive responses to external currents. Conscious engagement empowers individuals to influence outcomes, preserving autonomy and critical thought in an environment shaped by pervasive, subtle forces. Ultimately, the next ideology demonstrates the extraordinary potential of incremental, systemic, and invisible influence. Change unfolds organically, embedding itself in thought, culture, and institutions over decades. Understanding these dynamics allows insight into societal evolution, mechanisms of influence, and the shaping of collective futures. Observing, reflecting, and engaging with awareness provides the tools to navigate and influence these currents intelligently, ensuring informed and thoughtful participation in a complex world. As viewers, consider your role within these invisible yet powerful currents. How do your actions, interpretations, and choices intersect with ideologies silently shaping your environment? Awareness, reflection, and deliberate engagement provide agency, allowing active participation in shaping the world around you. If this resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share, contributing to the ongoing exploration of the forces quietly guiding society's trajectory, fostering understanding, insight, and conscious engagement. The ideology works by embedding itself in the unseen currents of daily life, influencing choices, expectations, and thought patterns without overt declaration. Its principles are reinforced in subtle ways, through routine, habit, and social interaction. Over time, these small, consistent influences accumulate, producing widespread alignment across communities, institutions, and generations. Its strength lies in its quiet, almost invisible integration, which allows adoption to feel natural rather than imposed. Communication networks and media amplify this subtle shaping. Narratives, images, and repeated patterns of thought transmit norms and expectations, guiding perception and decision-making. Exposure is cumulative. Individuals internalize ideas gradually, often unconsciously. The ideology spreads organically through networks, feedback loops, and shared culture, silently shaping cognition and behavior while remaining largely invisible to the observer. Culture serves as both conduit and reinforcement. Music, art, literature, and storytelling embed values, assumptions, and frameworks for understanding. These narratives shape how people interpret morality, success, and social responsibility, aligning perception with the ideology's underlying principles. Engagement with culture conditions cognition, ensuring that adoption occurs organically, without overt coercion, making alignment feel intuitive and inevitable. Economic and structural forces reinforce adoption. Incentives, professional opportunities, and social recognition reward alignment while subtly discouraging deviation. Market forces, workplace norms, and institutional frameworks create environments where adhering to the ideology is advantageous. Through these converging pressures, principles become embedded in both personal behavior and societal structure, further entrenching influence across generations. Education, from early schooling to lifelong learning, provides additional vectors of reinforcement. Curricula, media literacy, and informal learning establish interpretive frameworks, guiding cognitive patterns and shaping reasoning. Repeated engagement fosters internalization of principles, ensuring that alignment persists and adapts across age groups and societal cohorts, producing durable influence. Psychology underpins voluntary adoption. Humans naturally seek understanding, coherence, and belonging. The ideology provides frameworks that satisfy these needs, offering clarity, emotional resonance, and avenues for meaningful engagement. Alignment is reinforced internally, creating loyalty and adherence without overt enforcement. Individuals feel affirmed, understood, and connected, further embedding influence at a personal and communal level. Global connectivity accelerates and magnifies adoption. Ideas, practices, and feedback circulate across societies, reinforcing coherence while permitting localized adaptation. Unlike historical movements limited by geography or communication barriers, this ideology evolves dynamically across global populations, integrating diverse perspectives and producing synchronized adoption across regions. Its systemic influence becomes almost self-reinforcing, drawing momentum from widespread alignment. Political and institutional systems codify adoption long after it occurs in society. Laws, policies, and governance structures reflect behaviors and norms that are already internalized culturally. Apparent ideological dominance appears sudden, yet it is the result of decades of subtle, cumulative influence. Institutions reinforce and stabilize adoption, illustrating the extraordinary power of decentralized, pervasive, and gradual transformation. Decentralization ensures durability. The ideology thrives without dependence on singular leadership, rigid hierarchies, or dogmatic enforcement. Critique is absorbed and reframed, opposition is integrated, and influence operates through perception, networks, and cumulative engagement. This ensures continuity, resilience, and adaptability, allowing the ideology to endure societal shifts and challenges while maintaining coherence across diverse contexts. For individuals, conscious observation and reflection are crucial. Understanding patterns of influence, recognizing subtle shaping of thought and behavior, and actively engaging in decision-making empowers agency. Choices, communication, and action become deliberate instruments, enabling participation rather than passive alignment. Awareness transforms observation into engagement, allowing individuals to navigate and influence these currents thoughtfully and ethically. Ultimately, the next ideology demonstrates the extraordinary impact of incremental, systemic, and invisible influence. Transformation unfolds quietly, embedding itself across cognition, culture, social structures, and institutions over decades. Recognizing these patterns provides profound insight into societal evolution, mechanisms of influence, and the shaping of collective futures. Thoughtful engagement equips individuals to navigate and interact with these forces intelligently, ensuring informed participation in an increasingly complex world. As viewers, consider your place within these currents. How do your beliefs, actions, and interpretations interact with ideologies quietly shaping your environment? Reflection, discernment, and intentional engagement provide agency, allowing active participation in shaping outcomes. If this resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share, contributing to the exploration and understanding of the forces silently guiding society's trajectory, fostering insight, awareness, and conscious engagement. The final currents of this ideology flow through both the visible and invisible layers of society, integrating thought, culture, and behavior seamlessly. Its power is not in force, nor in spectacle, but in patient accumulation, subtle reinforcement, and systemic adoption. By the time recognition occurs, alignment is already deeply entrenched, having shaped patterns of choice, perception, and expectation across generations. It moves quietly, yet decisively, leaving a trail of influence that is as enduring as it is profound. In daily life, the influence manifests in ordinary decisions, in habitual routines, and in the frameworks people use to interpret reality. Individuals feel guided not by external authority, but by internalized principles that have been absorbed gradually, shaping ethical judgments, social interactions, and priorities. The ideology embeds itself where it is least noticeable, yet its effect is unmistakable in collective alignment and societal coherence. Communication, culture, and shared experience work in harmony to amplify this influence. Narratives, symbols, and repeated patterns of thought act as quiet conduits, transmitting values and expectations. Individuals internalize these signals naturally, creating alignment without conscious effort or external enforcement. The result is a society where principles are universally understood, embedded in thought and action alike, producing coherence that feels organic, inevitable, and enduring. Economic structures and social incentives continue to reinforce adoption. Behaviors aligned with the ideology are rewarded through recognition, opportunity, and social affirmation, while divergence is subtly discouraged. Over time, these feedback loops normalize adherence, producing systemic integration that transcends mere compliance and becomes a reflection of internalized understanding. The ideology persists not by decree, but by shaping environments in which its principles are naturally reinforced. Education, lifelong learning, and cultural exposure provide additional layers of reinforcement. Repeated engagement over time embeds interpretive frameworks, shaping reasoning, judgment, and perception. The influence becomes self-sustaining, passing from generation to generation, adapting fluidly to changing environments while preserving core principles. This continuity ensures resilience and longevity, embedding the ideology as a structural and cognitive reality within society. Psychology reinforces voluntary alignment. Humans seek understanding, coherence, and belonging. The ideology provides frameworks that satisfy these needs, producing loyalty and internalized adherence. Emotional and rational resonance converge, fostering voluntary engagement that deepens adoption across personal, communal, and institutional levels. Individuals feel both affirmed and empowered, creating a subtle yet powerful connection that drives enduring influence. Global networks magnify this effect. Cross-border communication, trade, and cultural exchange enable rapid adaptation and refinement, integrating lessons from diverse societies. Adoption becomes synchronized, coherent, and systemic, producing alignment across multiple populations simultaneously. Unlike historical ideological waves constrained by borders, contemporary influence moves fluidly across contexts, reinforcing itself and sustaining momentum. Institutions formalize adoption, often after it has taken root culturally. Laws, policies, and governance structures reflect behaviors and norms already internalized by society. Apparent dominance seems sudden, but it is the product of decades of subtle, cumulative influence. Institutions serve as codifiers and stabilizers, solidifying patterns that have already become naturalized within thought, behavior, and culture. Decentralization ensures resilience and adaptability. Without reliance on singular leadership or rigid hierarchy, the ideology absorbs critique, reframes opposition, and evolves dynamically. Influence operates through networks, perception, and repeated engagement, creating continuity and endurance. Its integration across cognition, culture, and structure ensures that it persists through societal change, maintaining coherence across generations. For individuals, conscious observation, reflection, and engagement provide agency. Recognizing patterns of influence, understanding mechanisms, and actively navigating subtle currents empowers informed participation. Choices, communication, and action become instruments of influence, enabling thoughtful engagement in shaping outcomes while preserving autonomy. Awareness transforms passive alignment into deliberate action, allowing individuals to navigate complex societal currents responsibly and insightfully. Ultimately, the next ideology exemplifies the extraordinary potency of incremental, systemic, and invisible influence. Transformation unfolds quietly, embedding itself in cognition, culture, social structures, and institutions over decades. Its impact is pervasive, enduring, and profound, shaping collective futures in ways that are subtle yet undeniable. Understanding these mechanisms provides insight into societal evolution and equips individuals to participate intelligently in shaping the world. As this reflection concludes, consider your own position within these currents. How do your actions, interpretations, and choices intersect with ideologies quietly shaping your environment? Awareness, discernment, and deliberate engagement offer agency, empowering individuals to navigate, influence, and respond thoughtfully. If this insight resonates, like, comment, subscribe, and share, contributing to a conversation about the invisible forces quietly guiding society's trajectory, fostering understanding, reflection, and conscious participation.